So mistakes I see very often, just overall umbrella, overcomplicating it. Overcomplicating it. We've been taught that meal prepping is preparing food for the whole week, preparing all your meals, breakfast, lunch, dinner, cutting up vegetables for snack, washing fruits for snack, putting things into individual bento boxes, thinking it needs to take you hours to do this, hours on the weekend, but it doesn't. It doesn't need to take that much time. It can be super, super simple. Hello. Welcome back to another episode of She's in Sync, the podcast for women looking to have a safe transition off birth control and heal their hormones naturally. Today, we are switching gears a little bit and talking less about hormone healing and birth control and more about an everyday task that helps support hormone healing and healthy balanced hormones that I've been seeing women struggle with lately, and that is meal prepping. So a lot of times when I'm meeting with clients and they are maybe not doing what they're supposed to be doing, or they're having difficulty, or they're feeling stressed, and we talk about, okay, like what do you think needs to change to help you be more consistent with mocktails, help you get XYZ nutrients in, help you feel your body throughout the day. A lot of times they will say, well, I just need to meal prep. And what I've been asking them is, what does that mean to you? And a lot of times it means spending hours on the weekend prepping food, feeling like they have to plan the whole week in one day, putting things in individual bento boxes, planning breakfast, lunch, and dinner, having vegetables pre-washed and cut. And so when I talk to them about that, I'm like, that sounds like a lot of work. And they're like, yeah, it can sound really nice when we're talking about it of like, oh, like everything's ready to go. Like I literally don't have to do anything during the week. And on the flip side of that, that's a lot of work and pressure on yourself to do all of that. And that's oftentimes why a lot of times I feel like that gets pushed to the back burner. And so I have some tips and tricks up my sleeve of how I personally view meal planning and prepping. And I've been sharing that with a lot of my clients, and it's been really, really successful to setting them up to having a healthier, nourished week so that they aren't running out of food, they're wasting less time and less money, and they are also just taking the stress off of it. So the first thing I want to talk about, which I kind of just touched on, is like pros of meal prepping and planning. And I'm going to kind of use those words interchangeably. I consider them the same thing. But benefits is you have enough food to nourish yourself throughout the week. And if you're working with me and we've identified, okay, we need more copper-rich foods, we need more potassium-rich foods, we need to get more zinc-rich foods in, this will help you so you aren't just, getting to the end of the week and you're like, oh, I didn't have any copper-rich foods, I didn't have any potassium-rich foods. And so you can be more strategic throughout the week and it be less stressful if you have predetermined, you've done that heavy lifting ahead of time, which it doesn't have to be heavy lifting. We'll talk about that. So it sets you up to have enough food to nourish yourself throughout the week, and also the right types of food so that your blood sugar is stable, you're fueling your metabolism, your hormones, your skin, all that kind of stuff, so that you have less hormone symptoms, because that's step number one, is making sure you're eating enough and balanced nutritionally. Less stress. So less stress. We've all been there where it's like 5 p.m. and you're like, well, I have no food and I'm starving and I just had a long, stressful day. Now what? And you have to like scramble to get something together, or you're hangry and you end up being like, well, let's just order pizza for the millionth time. And which there's nothing wrong with that. But it's like, if you're doing that all the time, that's, spending money, and you probably want a variety of foods compared to just ordering pizza. And, you also might have kiddos who you are like, well, I have to make food for them and also me. And, it just is, it's stressful. And so if you have the food ahead of time, or at least you have a plan of like, okay, we're having this meal today and tonight, and I have the ingredients for it, like how much easier than being like, oh, we have to order pizza, or I have to go to the grocery store to get this thing or to get the components for this meal. Yeah, so it'll be less stress. It'll save you money because, like I said, you won't be needing to order in or eat out every time you're getting to that point, or have to go multiple trips to the grocery store. And then it will save you time. So a lot of times people think like, oh, it's going to take a lot of time to meal prep, but it doesn't have to. So those are the benefits. Now I want to go into the mistakes that people make with meal prepping and planning. So mistakes I see very often, just overall umbrella, overcomplicating it. Overcomplicating it. We've been taught that meal prepping is preparing food for the whole week, preparing all your meals, breakfast, lunch, dinner, cutting up vegetables for snack, washing fruits for snack, putting things into individual bento boxes, thinking it needs to take you hours to do this, hours on the weekend, but it doesn't. It doesn't. It doesn't need to take that much time. It can be super, super simple. So I want you to think about these things, and you can choose, pick and choose all of these things, or you can choose some of these things. But, it could be, instead of sitting down and planning like all your meals for the week, or sorry, I retract that. It could be sitting down and planning your meals for the week and just getting the necessary ingredients. Maybe you don't even do any like prep work. Maybe you this is oftentimes what I do now. I used to be that person who, when I was, in my 20s and I got my first big girl job, like I would spend like hours on Sunday, like prepping all my meals for the week. And I will say, like, there's nothing wrong with that. If you do that and that works for you, great. But I've just found that, especially depending on what season of life you're in, that's putting more stress and that's making things harder, and you're not going to do it, or you're not going to stick with it. But for a season of my life, it did actually, like, it was helpful because I was working really weird hours. I was working long days. I was working sometimes on the weekends. So like I kind of needed to do that. And then it wasn't until I met Jared and like I got him, like, that's something like we did, because I'm the primary one still to this day that does the cooking. He does the cleaning, but I'm the one that like plans the meals, does the grocery order for pickup and makes the food, and he like cleans it up, which is fine. That works for us. But he hated meal prepping, like hated it. And then another thing that also it stinks with that is like, okay, the sooner you prep the food, the sooner it like goes bad, right? So it's like, okay, if I prepped everything Sunday, it's like, I mean, based on my training, like this was a little too long for certain foods. They say like 3 to 4 days, but like 6 days was my cutoff. So do as I say, not as I do with that maybe. But I'd be like, okay, by Saturday, everything I made was like bad, which like at that point I would have eaten most of it anyways, but still. So anyways, he hated that and he would complain about it. And I just, I also had other things. I wanted to hang out with him on the weekend and like do stuff with him. And so I was in a new relationship. I didn't want to like be spending hours prepping. So that softened things and like made me more flexible with food. And that was a really good thing. But anyways, it could just be sitting down and planning your meals for the week. And that's what I do now. Long story short, on the weekends, I think about, okay, like I look ahead and I think, okay, how many meals do I need? And then I plan them, and I then put a grocery store order in. I'm big on grocery pickup nowadays. COVID got me into that. I rarely actually go to the grocery store. And pro tip, I also hate how wasteful it is when you do grocery pickup with all the plastic bags. So you can actually, if you didn't know this, you can save them. And when you walk into most grocery stores, they have where you can recycle them. So I do that every once in a while. I'll save them up and then I'll like do a big bag drop off. So I'm not wasting those bags because I hate that. It's one downside to grocery pickup. But anyways, so sitting down, planning your meals for the week, putting a grocery store order in or going to the grocery store, getting all of the ingredients. So that way, when 5 o'clock rolls around, it's like, okay, like I know I'm having XYZ meals. Which one sounds the best for tonight? Which one am I feeling? Or which one is like, maybe if I have a earlier day at work and I'm more energized and inspired to cook, it's like I'll do the more complicated meal, compared to on a day where I'm like, ooh, I don't want to. Like I could have leftovers, or I can do like the sheet pan meal that I had planned. So thinking through what you need, getting the ingredients, and that could be it. You maybe don't even have to do any prep work. It's just having the items and having a plan. It could also be prepping just one meal. You don't have to prep every single meal, right? Like I have clients who they're like, okay, like I like breakfast sandwiches. And so I'll make like breakfast sandwiches and I'll freeze them. And then I will make this meal for dinner. And then I'll, have this quinoa salad for lunch. And I'm like, do you need to do all that? Or could we do like a frozen breakfast breakfast sandwich? Like, would that suffice? Because that's a lot, like to prep all of the food. And so they're like, oh, yeah, like I just thought that was bad to have frozen food. And I'm like, no, 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 it's not. Like that's where we putting this pressure on ourselves to be perfect with eating is less healthy for us than just doing the frozen meal. And there's nothing wrong with frozen things. There's nothing wrong with canned things. If you're just doing those things all the time, we want variety, but pick and choose what you want to do. Okay. So for example, today, like for breakfast, I get gluten-free bagels. Queen Street Bakery is the brand I like. If you're in the market for a gluten-free bakery, or gluten-free bagel, it's definitely not like a regular bagel, but it's the best that I've come across and has lots of fiber in it. And yeah, it's good. So I had a cinnamon raisin bagel with some almond butter, and then I had some yogurt and some berries. Literally took me 10 minutes from start to finish. Okay. Super simple. For you, it might be eggs. For you, it might be oatmeal. For you, it might be a smoothie. But you don't have to prep up everything like that ahead of time. Maybe breakfasts are the things you need to prep, right? Like maybe you have kiddos that you need to get out the door and you're like, that is actually the meal that I need to prep versus dinners, I can cook that at night. So maybe you do need to prep, but just kind of think about like where do your values lie in terms of like what's the most important to you food-wise, enjoyment-wise, satisfaction-wise, and that's what you can prep. But don't feel like you have to prep breakfast and lunches and dinners. And a big thing that I like to do is I like to make extra for dinner and then just have leftovers for lunch. I talk about this all the time, where it's like if I'm out of leftovers and I don't have eggs, it's like I'm pretty much screwed for lunches. Like those are my go-tos. Or this week is an outlier, but I was like, I'm really craving hummus and pretzels. I don't know why. So, and our neighbors they have a bunch of like cucumbers out and like fresh cucumbers. So I'm like, ooh, that would be good with hummus. And so I'm like, what can I make to balance that out? A sandwich. That sounds great. So I got deli meat, I got cheese, avocado, I got some like sourdough. So I have I've been having a sandwich and some pretzels and veggies with hummus this week. So it's like I know what I'm having for lunches, but super easy. Again, takes me like 5 minutes to put together. You could also maybe do some batching a couple times a week. So maybe instead of doing it all on Sunday or whatever, you are like, okay, well, I actually did this week. I was making a meal on Sunday and I was like roasting vegetables for that meal. I was like, oh, well, might as well. I was planning on roasting another vegetable for a different meal and I was making potatoes for a different meal. So I was like, well, might as well just like take an extra half hour and like do it all together. So I made 2 dinner meals that also duplicated into lunches at the same time. So I made this like salmon meal with like this spinach, sun-dried tomato, Florentine sauce with this lemon orzo, roasted squash, roasted asparagus, and roasted potatoes. So I had 2 meals in the span of like maybe an hour and a half. I was feeling inspired to do that. Like I wasn't planning on doing that, but I was like, oh, might as well. Like I have the oven on. It's like super hot out right now. I'm going to batch it anyway, so might as well just save myself some time. So that's what I did. So maybe you could do that, or maybe you could have 3 days. You can also get creative with like how you can kind of make components. You can make a couple different proteins, a couple different carbohydrates. So maybe you do roasted potatoes, you do like a pasta, you do like a grain, and then a couple different veggies, and you can just like interchange them. So maybe one day you do salmon with squash and orzo. I'm just going to go with what I did. Or maybe you do salmon, asparagus, and roast potatoes. You can kind of mix and match them just to make it easier. So it's not like you're eating the same thing over and over again, but you don't have to like, prep a bunch of different meals. So this also gets easier as you get into it. I will say, like, the more you do this, the more you'll see what works for you. And also in different seasons, you might do different things, right? So that also is something to consider. You don't have to be like locked into like, oh, I'm going to do this and this is what I'm going to do. This is what's going to work. Just like try these things out and see what works and pick and choose based on what works for you and your family and your life. Some other tips and tricks I have too is the first thing I would say is like just do some planning. And this goes with like food in general. I talk with my clients of like your life should revolve around food in a not disordered way. Because so often we're so used to revolving like our food is like an afterthought where it's like, okay, if, like I just met with a client yesterday and she was like, on the weekends I actually struggle because my kids are like in all these activities and we're like, running around. And so sometimes I find myself like I eat breakfast maybe, and then I like don't eat until 7 p.m. when we get home. And I'm like, well, we need to work on that. That's not good. And so for her, I was like, we need to start looking ahead at our week and be like, okay, like, do we have a lot of activities this day? Am I working late this day? If so, take those things into account. So for example, me, I like will look at my week and I will see, am I eating out with any friends or Jared and I going out to eat? Are we traveling? Because that will help me determine my baseline. How many dinners do I need? So I know for us, typically 4 meals will get us through, like 4 dinners will get us through the week, and me having some leftovers for lunch. He has the same meal for lunch. Like he does not eat leftovers. So that's all me, which is nice. But that is like typically the baseline. Last weekend, we went to a wedding and he actually was gone. He went up to Cleveland a little bit sooner than I did. So I made 3 meals. Okay. That lasted me through Friday. So you can kind of look ahead and be like, okay, like how many meals do I need based on what's going on this week? And also how complicated can I get with these meals? Based on how inspired you are, there are going to be weeks where you're like, I want to, make all these really good meals, or I, found these recipes and I'm like really excited to make them. And then there are going to be weeks where you're busier and you're like, okay, I just need to do some sheet pan meals. I need to do like a tried and true pasta that I like and my kids like, and keep it simple. So if I'm working later, or like, a couple weeks ago, I was launching my master class. And so that's a lot of work. And I was like, I just need to keep things simple. And so I did some tried and true recipes as well. I didn't get creative. So looking at what your schedule is like, what you need to prep, how many meals you need to prep and plan. And then again, putting it all in a grocery list and getting those things. And maybe that's the extent of it for you. The other thing is utilizing support. So asking for help and accountability with this. Oftentimes women are like, I do it all myself. And that probably isn't working. So this is where you can talk with your partner. You can talk with your kids if they're old enough. You can talk with a roommate. You guys can like be like, are we going to sit down on a day and plan out our meals? So I know one client who I was talking about with this, she was like, yeah, we just kind of are on the fly and it's the 5 p.m. oh shit moment and we have to go to the grocery store. We just end up like, doing a frozen pizza or whatever. And so we talked about like her and her husband sitting down on Saturday or Sunday and like planning out what they're going to have for meals and also running it by their kids because one of their kiddos is a picky eater. And then getting like, she'll plan it or they plan it together depending on what they're doing. And then he goes to the grocery store and he gets the items. So it's like they'll plan it on the weekend. He goes to the grocery store on Tuesday. But getting granular like that, sometimes you have to get granular where it's like, okay, like we're doing this day, and then we're doing this day. And I know this might sound like a lot of work, but trust me, it's going to save you so much time, so much energy. And it's not a lot of work, like once you get in the habit of it. So you might need to put a reminder in your phone. You might, again, this can be where accountability is helpful, where you're like, maybe you need to get as specific as like, depending on your schedule, if you're really busy, maybe it's like, Sundays at 1 p.m., that's our meal planning time. That's our meal planning time to just like take a beat, look at the week ahead, figure out what we're going to have, like what we're going to do for food. Because this is a big deal. Like food is a big deal. Like it's what nourishes you. It's what helps you feel your best. It's what allows you to be a good wife, mom, partner, friend, worker, business owner, like, and of course, like help you feel good yourself, right? So don't think that this is like this big complicated thing. or something that's like silly to get granular with, because I promise you it's very helpful and you will get in the habit of it after you do this over time. It'll be a habit. So utilize support, ask for help or accountability. And then in terms of inspo, I'm going to drop my two favorite recipe blogs that I really like. If I am, I used to in college, like I would like love meal prepping. I was weird. I would like love meal prepping and like chopping vegetables and going to the store, like I loved that. And that was the season where I loved that. And now I'm like, I've got so much going on. Like I want to keep it simple and I want it to be low lift for me. And I just have less inspiration in that area. I have inspiration in other things. And that's just an area where I'm like, I like food, but it's nourishment for my body. It's less of like it's less of a hobby than it used to be. And so I use recipe blogs for inspo, and I've also been using ChatGPT because especially if I have like a random ingredient, or what I've been doing this summer, I like to go to the farmer's market. So I'll go to the farmer's market, and I used to put a lot of pressure on myself of like, okay, like I have to know what I'm having this week. And, but on Saturday mornings, it's like I just finished the week. I'm like, just want to do something fun. And so what I did one time that I wasn't planning, I just picked out what looked good or what sounded good in the moment. And then I came home and I was like, what am I gonna do with all this? This is a bunch of random stuff. So I put it in ChatGPT and it helped me like make meals from it. And ever since then, I was like, oh, this is like super helpful. And so I utilize that, whether it's like I have half a can of ricotta left or half a container of ricotta left. And I'm like, what am I going to make with this? So it helps me figure that out. Or if I get a random assortment of things, or if I have like one sweet potato left and, a little bit of arugula left, it like just helps me put those things together. And if you're a client of mine too, I also created a video breaking down how you can use this based on your protocol. So going back to when we were talking about like if you're focusing on certain foods and getting certain nutrients in, I have a whole breakdown of how you can copy that into ChatGPT and prompt it so it automatically creates balanced meals that hit all of the goals of your protocol. So that takes even more stress off of you. So if you want that and you don't have that yet, just shoot me a message and I can send that to you. But those are two things that can be helpful for inspo and to make it so you're not just like sitting there scratching your head of like, okay, I'm sitting down. I made it a priority to plan meals for the week, but now I'm like, I have no clue what to make. You can use these recipe blogs or, and or ChatGPT to help you. So in summary, meal planning and prepping doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to take a lot of time, and it can be really beneficial to do, especially in certain seasons of your life. And it doesn't have to mean like you're spending hours on the weekend doing this. And in fact, one last thing I want to say is that like maybe meal prepping is what you need to do for the weekends. I kind of said that, but just want to drive that home of like maybe for you, it's prepping on and planning on Fridays. For someone else, it's Sundays for the week ahead. But we don't have to overcomplicate it. It doesn't have to take a lot of time or energy, and it can save you time and energy and money if you utilize this. So I hope this was helpful. If this is an episode that you know a friend or family member could use, please send it their way. And as always, if you are open to leaving a review, a comment, a 5-star rating, it really helps push this show into more viewers' ears of women who need this information. So I would really, really appreciate that. And until next time, stay nourished, friends.